Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained in 2012. Here is the Blu-ray Steelbook, and of course we are back with another Tarantino review. Of course, this week been watching a few more Tarantinos, and yes, I did say that tonight, which is Friday, I'll be rewatching Django Unchained, and then we'll probably have a break, until January, where I'll be watching The Hateful Eight. And of course, that's the final Tarantino. So yeah, it's been amazing to rewatch them. I never actually have done this all the way through, in order, all of them, because of course, Death Proof was the first time I saw it the other day. So this is actually the first time that I've done this. But Tarantino is in my top 10 directors, and quite a few of his films I've seen multiple times, and try to watch quite often. This being one of them. Now, of course, this is a very very popular film at times, and other times, not so much. I suppose, Tarantino films, most of them are divisive. Apart from maybe Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. Most of them, they are in some way divisive. Times you'd see this near the bottom of the lists, rankings. Other times near the top, and of course critically, it's very very popular. And yes, in IMDb, it's I believe it's in the top 100. So yeah, an 8.4, which is extremely high. And yeah. This film I was hyped for, and I kind of saw a couple of trailers, and of course I already had seen a few Tarantinos, I'd seen Inglourious Basterds, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction, of course. So yeah, and then I'd heard this was coming out. It's his Western, and I'd kind of always kind of thought his tributes, throughout some of his films are kind of already like this, even Inglourious Basterds, and of course I hadn't seen Kill Bill at that time, but yes, Django, I was just pumped for. I was excited to see what he done with it, and it just, the cast, of course, Leonardo DiCaprio especially, one of my favourite actors of all time, and I think definitely one of the very best of the century. I love him in so many things. I've never really seen a bad performance from him. I think Leonardo, is amazing, and I heard, of course, he was in the film, and it just looked amazing, and of course, yeah, I didn't actually go and see it at the cinema. I didn't really have much money and stuff, and yeah, the usual. Waited till it came out on DVD. Didn't have a Blu-ray player then, and yes, I watched it. I sat down to watch it, and of course, I'd heard some great things about it. I'd been so hyped, and it'd been a while that it had been out, and I was waiting for so long to see it, and yes, of course, I have been hinting on some of my other videos, Tarantino, that there's not just Kill Bill that I prefer to Pulp Fiction. There is another film that he made that I actually prefer to Pulp Fiction, and I do think it's better. Here it is. It's Django Unchained. Yes, I think it's that good. So Pulp Fiction is in my top 50 at the moment. And I think it's an absolute masterpiece, a magnum opus, one of the best films ever made, and I think this is actually better in every way apart from maybe the script. I think this is one of the very best films ever made. I saw it, the first time I saw it, and I was shocked. I thought, wow, that was better than Pulp Fiction. And of course, not a popular opinion, but who cares? That's my opinion, and I don't. I think this is better in, as I say, pretty much every way. This film, I was absolutely. I just thought, wow. Oh my, that film was a masterpiece. One of the very best films I've ever seen, and I think on the rewatches it's kind of just even better than when I first saw it on Blu-ray. Of course, seeing it on Blu-ray, and I got the Steelbook, 2014, this Steelbook here, and it just enhanced it even more. Just a wonderful cinematography, and yes, this film, of course, very very controversial. You could say, but actually, kind of, most people didn't really criticize it outright, like a lot of his other films, really. Of course, the use of certain words, which, of course, it's kind of stupid to say, to criticize that, because as he said, and as he's rightfully said, at that time, this is 1858. The words that were used were probably used a lot more than they were in the film, and it's just kind of it's stupid. Why would he kind of hide that? And it's not. It's not a case of him relishing in that. It's a case of his just being true to what happened, And of course, but again, it's a comedy, like all Tarantino's. Really, it's a comedy. Less so maybe Jackie Brown and stuff, but and Hateful Eight, but you know, it's a comedy, and you know what the film is empowering. You know, and of course, you know, it's pretty obvious. You know, Django is, you know, the main hero of the film, and you know he's the one. You know, it's a slave, and he uprises. You know, from the very beginning, of course, played by Jamie Foxx wonderfully, and you know, Oscar-worthy performance. You know, he kind of rises up. He's at first he's a slave, Django Freeman, basically with a wonderful opening credits. With you know the original Django theme playing. You see him in chains. The harsh, you know, the harshness of slavery. This film is shocking. You know, it's not. You know, of course, it's more of a comedy than say 12 Years a Slave, and you know, it doesn't quite focus as much on the kind of just on the actual the acts of slavery, but you know it does show a lot. Of course, this was a year before, and really there hadn't been much films that were like this that really showed slavery in this way and highlighted the issues there. So yeah, this film is very very extreme in its violence, not just with what happens with the slavery, what he's kind of showing there and kind of bringing highlighting the issues. It is, just in its shootouts and everything. Again, it's stylized, but there's very, very shocking stuff that happens in this film. But again, this is what happened. Unfortunately, it is very, very hard to believe that any human, could ever have done this. But that's the case, and Tarantino highlights this. Again, as I say, still haven't been, much films that really dig into this. It is very, very, of course, hard and difficult subject matter. But yes, this film, it starts with Django as a slave, and Dr. Ken Schultz, played wonderfully by Christoph Waltz. Here he is even better than he was in Inglourious Basterds. So yeah, one of the best villains of all time in Inglourious, and in this, just even better. And this warm, gentle character, funny, and everything. But he's my favourite character in the film, and of course, I will put in the description. But we will be getting later on in the video into some spoiler territory, so yeah, that'll be in the description. You have been warned. If you've not seen the film, I guess most people that watch this review have probably seen the film, but yeah, if you've not seen it, I'd recommend watching it and then coming back to this. So yeah, Dr. Ken Schultz, he's a dentist turned bounty hunter, and basically, he rescues Django straight away in the opening scene, which again has a comedy in there and everything, and then instantly, you get a bit of the tone of what this film is. It's satirical, but it's also, of course, kind of an empowering kind of revenge kind of thing against all the people that own slaves and everything. So that's what Tarantino's going for in this. He's going for a kind of satire at times. Very very powerful, of course, but it's a kind of a kind of like Kill Bill was. Even more so, specifically to this, Inglourious Basterds was kind of rising against, the Nazis and everything. What he does in the final act, especially. This is kind of course, against, slave owners and stuff. And of course, eventually you get to Mississippi, which of course was the worst place for slavery. It's known to be, and yes, basically, they team up, these two characters of Django and Dr. Ken Schultz. And yes, they're bounty hunters. He helps him with this, and then of course he agrees eventually to basically helping free Django's wife, Broomhilda, who is played by Kerry Washington, and gives a wonderful performance as well. And I think she's just brilliant in this film. Very very touching performance. Again, very very shocking. But it's kind of handled with so much care. Tarantino just there's such a heart to this film. The care for the characters. The protagonists and the victims and everything, and yeah, just really amazing performance here. And basically, she kind of ties into this legend as well, this German legend in the film. So of course, Dr. Ken Schultz is German, and he kind of he sees something in what's going on as well with the German legend, with the Broomhilda, and of course, yeah, basically, eventually he teams up to actually go to Candyland, which is of course. This plantation, the biggest one really, or one of the biggest in the kind of area, to kind of rescue the wife of Django. And yeah, basically, the first half of the film is kind of them, collecting bounties and stuff, and then they go to Candyland and kind of, kind of infiltrate in many different ways. Of course, Candyland and eventually, yeah, try and free her. And of course, Leonardo DiCaprio plays Calvin Candy, the plantation owner, and yeah, you've got kind of, it turns into a different film a little bit after the hour mark. It's more of a chamber box kind of drama with loads more dialogue and everything, and much more intensity to the film, and different struggles there. And of course, yes, this film, it has everything. It's a powerful film highlighting all these issues, and it's a satire. It's a hilarious film. Of course, most people agree, and it's wonderfully shot. It's one of my favorite westerns of all time. It's got everything that I love about film and more. And of course, it has a wonderful romance. And just some of the finest acting, certainly of the century, and yeah, of all time. This film, of course, I think it's not the best western because of the good, bad, and the ugly. And for me, quite of course on my own here, but Dances with Wolves, I think is actually the greatest western of all time. But them two, are above this. This film, where I'd put it on the scale of best westerns of all time, would be just next down, right next to, if not for me, better than Once Upon a Time in the West. That is how good the film is. It is that good, I think, and yeah, I honestly think this is one of the best, certainly the best 40 films of all time. And it's in my top 30 favourites. I think, just in every way, this film is perfect. Of course. Again, I love the fact that Tarantino, kind of all of his films, apart from Death Proof and Reservoir Dogs, kind of all of his films are epic in length. So even though you get kind of somehow he's been criticised most times for the length of his films, but I look at it, I like longer films more if they're great. You wait quite a few years to see a Tarantino. He's not done that much, but what you get the most out of the weight kind of thing. And I love how they're always they've got quite a lot of content in the film, epic in length, and this film feels like such a journey. It's just the characters. Django's for me one of the best protagonists in film, and Jamie Foxx gives a stunning performance. He starts off kind of more quiet and subdued, and then as the film goes on, as he goes through more, with Dr. Ken Schultz, he opens up more, and he becomes a character you care for even more, and just epic. He's just it's just a cool character, and the epic finale, it's just amazing. And of course, Christoph Waltz, as I've said, is absolutely perfect in this film, and his character, he brings the warmth, the kind of caring nature to the film. Of course, he kind of acts like a father figure to Django, and of course, just the team up. The first hour is definitely it's so good. I think when they're together, the kind of friendship there is at its best, and then of course things happen on later in the film, which kind of have a ripple effect, and just you look back to these kind of not happy times, but just times where they were together more. And of course, in that sense, it's so powerful, their relationship throughout the film. And then you could say really that the second hour of the film is even better in terms of quality. This film just has scene after scene, throughout the entire film of masterful degree. I think it is cinematic perfection in my eyes. And the first hour is just some of the most enjoyable, epic stuff I've ever seen. And then of course, in many ways, as I say, the second hour is even better, and the finale is just, the last 10 minutes, it's one of the best endings really in cinema. It's kind of right up there with Kill Bill. The ending, you could say in some regards it's even better, but maybe not, better than the Kill Bill 2 ending, but better than the first probably. So yeah, this film, it's one of my favourite westerns. I think, it's probably my third or fourth definitely, and you'll see when I do my favourite films list of all time, next year probably. This will be extremely high. I first saw it, and I've seen it probably about 6 times, probably a bit more than that since. And it's so good, this film. It's better than I thought it would be, and I had massive hopes for it. And I think actually it's underrated as it stands. This film is just it succeeds in every level, and I think that there's such a warmth to this film, a heart. It's really really powerful the way Tarantino handles the subject matter. But again, it's Tarantino, his dialogue, many people call him unoriginal. He does draw on references throughout many films, of his films. of course, he uses in this film again. He uses loads of music, existing music. Ennio Morricone, of course, and it's all amazing. But Tarantino, you can't really compare the way the dialogue, kind of feels overall to any other film. Really, I think Tarantino, the dialogue in this is up there really with Pulp Fiction at times. I think maybe not quite as good dialogue as Pulp Fiction, but for me, everything's better. Everything else is better. I think the acting in this film is beyond Pulp Fiction. I think the cinematography, which and the editing, which is absolutely stunning. The cinematography in this is again, I think, one of the best, probably nearly or maybe in there of the top 30 best cinematography in film. And I think maybe again not quite as good as Kill Bill, but apart from that, it's his greatest cinematography. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Of course, just not just the way the landscapes and environments are captured, and of course the use of film, which is always amazing of Tarantino. It's the kind of the crash zooms and all this kind of stuff. There's such an energy to this film. There's an intensity. There's kind of a raw feeling. Kind of satirical at times, but very, very just visceral. As well. And it just the use of zooms in particular. And just his framing is absolutely immaculate. I think it's some of the best cinematography, as I said, of all time. And just the blood as well. The use of blood is kind of at times. Kind of create a painting effect kind of thing, and it has a poetry to it, brutality, and the combination of the two, the kind of beauty of it, and the violence. It's kind of it's up there with Kill Bill, in the way that that's juxtaposed, and the way that he creates this effect, this very, very harsh feel, but again, it's stylized violence, not for me gratuitous. Again, criticisms, of course, for every Tarantino film that comes out, because he's popular, and of course he has made violent films, but many people also make violent films in horrible ways, but they never get caught up on it. Tarantino, the violence in this is just, it's amazing. It's not done badly. It's stylized. It's so amazing. The effects, the blood effects and everything is wonderful. And just I love how over the top it is, in its gore, and just the shootouts. The shootouts are some of the best in the history of film, especially the first one near the end, in the second half of the film, where of course he takes down, spoilers of course, Leonardo DiCaprio's character. Well, he doesn't particularly, but that whole shootout, Christoph Waltz and everything, and then of course Django taking most people down, when they try and, get him, it's just amazing. I think the shootout there is it's so good, and of course it maintains the comedy there, and of course but again it's so intense. It's so just kind of I love how over the top it is, and it's so controlled in its kind of outrageousness, and just the use of slow motion, the music, and I'm not a massive fan of rap music and everything, but Tarantino even manages to use have amazing use of rap music and kind of hip hop and everything, and yeah, I think every track in this film, when it's used, I loved. I think it's not just of course Ennio Morricone music. He's got some soul music kind of in there, and he's got some rap and just as well kind of country music. Of course, I Got a Name by Jim Croce. When that is used, that's one of my favourite kind of moments in cinema, when they're kind of riding early on in the film, and I just think it's wonderful. The use of music in this film, it's perfect. Really, the soundtrack is close to Kill Bill. The Kill Bill films, not quite as good, but close. Definitely, I think there's nothing really I don't like in this. The soundtrack, and most of it I love. It gives me the shivers, and just the way that Tarantino uses it is just perfect. It just makes the film even more epic, and yeah, just wonderful use of music, and just, as I've said, every act in this film, it just builds and builds, and the finale is just one of the greatest in film. Yes, it's not, of course, as a kind of, it's not really a non-linear film at all. It's completely linear. You have got maybe one or two flashbacks lit throughout. Well, a few, of Django and that, but it's just it mostly is linear storytelling. But for me, it's pretty much his best, apart from of course Kill Bill. I think the storytelling is just it's stronger than Pulp Fiction to me. Yes, it's not as intricately designed and kind of unique or anything as Pulp Fiction, but for me, it's just better. I think on an emotional level, this is just so amazing. This is not just an epic, fun, all out kind of satisfying film about this point of history where kind of Django, of course, gets his own back and everything. And kind of an empowering film. It is actually a very emotional one, and of course, not just of course with the subject matter and what he does there, Tarantino in general, but this romance, and of course this whole character of Dr. Ken Schultz, his demise is just one of the saddest moments for me in the film. Of course you've got that double kind of double whammy of the villain getting killed off, and then the most likable character in the film getting killed off, and then Django is left on his own to kind of again go back for one last kind of rescue mission, you could say. And yes, very very straightforward plot, you could say, but so masterfully designed. The way that kind of things unfold, the friendship, the early friendship, just wonderful friendship of these two characters, and then the kind of the tragedy of it all, the poetic nature, the dialogue, and of course, I think that the kind of the scene where Leonardo is talking, with the skull, that whole kind of that monologue there, and of course, what happened with the blood and everything was amazing for Leonardo. Testament to his acting, but I think that whole kind of piece there is some of the best written and acted stuff in cinema. That is just, it could be called the scene of the film in terms of just dialogue. I think it's so good, and just the way that this film ends as well. It's just epic. It's a happy ending, and I think everything is kind of satisfying. He pays everyone back, blood for blood. And yes, I think he gets his his vengeance, you could say. And yeah, I think this film is just so good. It's a masterpiece for me. I think everything about it is just epic. Every department, the costumes as well. Just the sets. This film is so wonderful to look at, and it creates that time period, of course, wonderfully. It's a period piece, but it has, of course, got the Tarantino spin on everything. And of course, you could say this, Inglourious Bastards, Kill Bill. These films are very, very ultra stylized, you could say, to a point, where Tarantino goes so far with the style and this kind of his own sort of look at the film, everything. That it becomes kind of fantasy films as well. But because the combination between that and the kind of, yes, it is stylized violence, but the violence is so excessive and everything in these films, and it's the themes, very very powerful, and just the acting is so good that it becomes this very very unique kind of blend of reality, and kind of and violence and fantasy, and just the way that, yes, at times, not meant to be, completely realistic, but that's not the point, of course. This is Tarantino's own, thing, his own stamp, and he's made, with this film, he's made a film that's never been made before. That it's like no other, and it kind of, in so many ways, it's satisfying, just like Inglourious as well. About these moments, in history, and but he handles it with so much care, and it's just, I was so pleased when I saw it. It's an entertaining film, but it's so wonderful in what it does, so powerful, and of course gets people talking as well, and kind of realizing more and more, about what happened and stuff. And it's just, I don't see how this could be criticized for some of the things that it was criticized for. And I think, of course, it always comes up, criticism of Tarantino. But if you want to hear what he says about it, just watch some interviews. He certainly handled it well, what he said, because that is what he was intending. And he's just, with this, he's achieved one of the greatest films of all time. Such a wonderful film. Jamie Foxx is legendary in this film. Christoph Waltz is my favourite character. And Leonardo DiCaprio gives the greatest performance in the film as one of the greatest villains of all time. You've got Samuel Jackson, who is amazing in this film. Contender for his best performance. And of course, probably still think Pulp Fiction has his greatest character, or at least his most memorable one. But this one is monumental. Actually, his performance is so good. And of course, the tension. The tension really in the last sort of hour of the film just before I've got, or after, kind of, it's not quite as tense at the end because you kind of know what's going to happen. But the whole table scene, basically, it's just so tense. The way that Tarantino builds and builds and sustains, the tension within the dialogue, within the scenario, just the emotion of it, and just how it is so masterfully constructed. This kind of whole sequence when they get to Candyland is just wow. The dramatic irony, of course, as well, where you're hoping they're not found out, and they are, of course. And it's just very, very bold to, of course, kill off Christoph Waltz's character in the way that happens. Even after they got their freedom, but of course, you don't know quite if they would have gotten away. But he sticks to his principles, and he's for me, he's just one of the best characters in film. Even though, of course, it risked in many ways their lives. He couldn't resist, as he said, because of seeing how despicable Leonardo DiCaprio's character was throughout the entire film. He had enough, and he wanted to kind of get revenge on him. I just think that moment, that whole leading up to that, and then that moment where the payoff happens, it's just and you got the double whammy. It's not just one-sided. You lose one of the main characters of the film that you're rooting for, and then of course you've got that all-out kind of epic finale. The way the character of Django is slowly, subtly built up in the first act of the film, and then the way he transforms, he becomes more confident, throughout the film, and then of course the final, where he's on top of everything, and then he gets his revenge on really everyone, throughout the film. It's just such a transformation, and Jamie Foxx is so good in this film, the performance, and just the way that it's kind of got this mythic feel to it, like all the best westerns have. The mythic qualities to this, the way that legend is built, from this very, very, beginning with this very, very small, kind of quiet, subtle scene, and then you've got, from there on, it just gets, bigger and bigger, more epic, but the dialogue is so masterfully constructed, even though, it kind of, a lot of the first hour or so hasn't got quite as much dialogue, and then it goes more heavy on that, and it's got everything, this film. It's an adventure film, it's got some of the greatest characters in film, and just the way it's from shot, it's a beautiful film, and of course, the use of blood, the violence in general, kind of culminates, into just a very, very poetic and brutal at the same time film. This is one of the greatest in film, and of course it gets my highest rating of 100% plus. Tier S. Once again, Tarantino has created a magnum opus with this film. I think, of course, I've given Pulp Fiction the two Kill Bill films, which for me is kind of a one piece, but of course they are separate films, so I reviewed them individually. And of course Django, so that's 4 films I've given my highest rating from Tarantino. And yes, it stops there. I'll say now, The Hateful Eight isn't that. Find out what I think of that. Maybe it's not even full marks, but I think it's a great film. But this is in many ways Tarantino at his best. I think only Kill Bill tops this, and I think this at times it's not miles off of Kill Bill. It's very, very close on my list. I do prefer Kill Bill, and I think it's better. But I think this is a fairly close second. I think it's in my top 30 as well of all time. And of course, not everyone loves this film, but I think it's cinematic perfection. I think in every regard, Tarantino is in such control of everything. You really, I just think it's a genius, and it's so inspirational. This film, it's empowering. It's epic, hilarious once again. Just as funny in many ways as Pulp Fiction. As its funniest film. But again, it's such kind of powerful subject matter that Tarantino just pulls off wonderfully. I think it's a very, very shocking film, but that is kind of course what happened, and the way he shows this, it's just it's kind of great that he highlights these issues. That's the important thing, and of course he makes a satire along the way, which is very, very risky, but he pulls it off so well that it's an absolute masterpiece, a magnum opus, and it's a very, very powerful film. The emotion that I get from this, it makes me cry, it makes me laugh. It's epic, in every sense. The way everything is captured, even just the horse riding, everything. It's just shivers throughout the entire film. The dialogue is almost as gripping as it's ever been in a Tarantino film, and really in cinema. You've got some of the best performances. What an ensemble this is. Just even the very minor characters. Wow. Of course, Christoph Waltz plays my favourite character. Of course, Jamie Foxx is perfect in the film. Kerry Washington, and then you've got Leonardo DiCaprio, probably given his best performance that he's ever given, which is saying a lot. And he plays one of the greatest villains of all time. This film is very, very complex, but it kind of as well, it's on the surface a simple linear film, which I think at their best are better, in terms of storytelling than non-linear ones. Of course, there are some that kind of break that rule, but I just the way that this kind of gradually unfolds, throughout the film, builds and builds, and then you get the final payoff, and kind of extra payoff. You could say it's like an epilogue. You get Tarantino gives everything, and in many ways, as I say, this is pretty much is the greatest it's ever been. I just think Kill Bill's better. I think it's one of the top 5 westerns of all time. It's better than The Searchers, Unforgiven, and who knows? I won't say yet, but when we get to my favorite films list, Django Unchained could be higher than Once Upon the West, but it's kind of basically the 3rd or 4th best western for me of all time. That's what I think of Django Unchained, and this film. If you've not seen it, of course, well, this is a spoiler-filled review, but yes, if you've just skipped to the end and you've not seen it, highly recommend it. This film's one of the best of all time for me. It's always been one of my favourites since I saw it. I was blown away. It's a mind-blowing, masterfully constructed, very, very powerful, and important film, of course. And it's epic, it's hilarious, and it's one of the best films of all time. It's emotional, and it's almost Tarantino's greatest film, and it's just Kill Bill really that takes the cake for that. But this film, I absolutely love this. I adore it. It's one of the best films I've reviewed on my channel. Probably top 10, I would say. Yeah, probably top 10 that I've reviewed. And it's in my top 30 of all time. So yes, thanks for watching my review of Tarantino's magnum opus, Django Unchained.